Well, are we addicted to our traumas? Are we addicted to our pain? Yes, and I propose something else. I propose that it's not so much that we are addicted to our trauma or our pain, but rather we are more concerned with, unconsciously, more than anything else, and consciously, we are more concerned with the coping strategies, the compensatory strategies that we developed from a young age during our developmental years. We created these coping strategies to help us deal with pain, to help us deal with fear, to help us deal with the psychologically and emotionally and spiritually and relationally uncomfortable. These coping strategies helped us survive. They helped us understand the world and understand ourselves. Now, why are we more quote unquote addicted to these coping strategies as opposed to the trauma? Let me peel all of this back a little bit. So we live life. We're born and we're born into an environment that is either a really healthy environment that's conducive to our growth and our expansion, or an environment that really restricts us and almost forces us to live in fear. Now, in response to this fear, we develop these coping strategies or compensatory strategies that help us deal with it, that help us survive psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Now, what happens is if these coping strategies and these wounds that we develop, these pain points that we developed at a young age, if they're left unchecked, they continue to exist in our adult relationships. They continue to exist and play out in our adult world. And so we then become addicted. We need the coping strategies to be in our world. Why? Why would we need that? Because when the coping strategy is enacted, I'm going to give you an example of this in a moment. When it's enacted, it means we're safe. Because the association, the neurological and psychological association is we are safe if we are in this coping strategy. Remember, the ego loves and thrives. It loves familiarity. It thrives in the known, in what's familiar. And so with that said, we begin to understand that the ego wants familiarity and it wants to create circumstances where safety can be prominent. It can be dominant at the forefront of our attention. And so if we're in the coping strategy, we're safe. Remember that. Think about that for a moment. So we are orchestrating electromagnetically through our thoughts, through our actions, through our behaviors, subtle actions and behaviors, more overt actions and behaviors, compounded over periods of time. We are bringing in, drawing in, finding ourselves, quote unquote, in these circumstances and situations that are feeding into our ability or the opportunity to go into this coping strategy. And then we take a breath of fresh air and we think, oh, we're safe, we're good, we're in familiar grounds, we are clear, we're safe, we're safe, we're safe. Now let me give you an example of this. Think about growing up as a young child and never getting attention, never receiving affirmation, never receiving confirmation of who you are, never being validated in a healthy way, never being witnessed, never maybe being understood or seen. Maybe when you were hurt or you cried, you weren't given healthy attention by your caregivers, by your primary caregivers, by your parents, by your mother or your father. And so you developed according to attachment styles, what may be a nervous or anxious attachment style. And so as an adult, you may find yourself being really needy or clingy in relationships. For me, my attachment style was interesting. It was a combination of avoidant and anxious. And the reason why was because I grew up in a very volatile environment, a very volatile situation. There was a lot of violence in my family. My father was there, but then most of the time he wasn't there. There was violence amongst my parents, physical and emotional abuse. There was shame in my family. There was a lot of restriction and rigidity. And so it was very confusing. So I developed almost this anxious and avoidant attachment style, dependent on my situation, how I felt at the time and many other factors. But let's stay on the anxious for a moment. So as an adult, you generally will become needy, you become clingy. You'll have a desperate, fearful energy of losing that person. If they're not giving you attention, you're asking the question, do they love me? Do they care about me? I'm not feeling them. They want to spend time with their friends. Does that mean they don't like me anymore? Does that mean they don't want to be with me? They don't appreciate me? They don't value me? Is this what it means? So I found myself in relationships sometimes being really clingy. Now, that's a very unattractive trait. So when we're talking biological, physiological attraction dynamics, that doesn't exude confidence, that doesn't exude certainty, that doesn't exude self-respect and self-assurance. And so therefore, it emits this energy of, I'm not really clear on who I am in the world. And so generally, unconscious, unresolved wounding will attract unconscious, unresolved wounding, and usually the polarity of that, the complementary wounding. And so in most cases, if you find yourself being anxious, and sometimes, by the way, two anxious people can definitely attract each other, and there'll be complementary wounding in other areas, just to clarify that. But you may find that you're attracting someone that's avoidant. So when they grew up, they really struggled with, whenever there was tension, whenever there was conflict, they witnessed their parents shutting that down perhaps and moving away. And so the way that they would deal with conflict as adults is to push it away. No, I don't want to deal with that. That's too intense for me. That's too painful. I'm going to walk away. I'm out of here. So the moment you're being anxious or clingy, the moment that person feels pressure is the moment they push you away. Now, what does that do? That perpetuates your wounding. And so you then have to bring in this self-soothing mechanism, the coping strategy. Maybe it's complaining or speaking to a friend and getting the attention of another loved one. Maybe it's running to a sibling or even one of your parents maybe. And it's seeking validation. So the coping strategy is in place. So I'm getting validation that I'm a good person. Or maybe you begin to manipulate the situation in your partnership to attempt to get some form of validation from them. And so the coping strategy is in place again. This loops and goes on and on and on and on. And this feeling of safety is coming from a maladaptive place. What once worked, what once was helped you, it kept you safe psychologically, emotionally, physically. It really helped you as a child. Doesn't help you now in your adult relationships. It only repels intimacy. It repels bonding and connection. It repels love. It repels the closeness that you can form as a young adult or as an adult. And we'll continue these cycles because we become addicted to the safety of the coping strategy. The safety that the coping strategy gives us, the sense of safety, the illusion even of safety. Because if we're in unhealthy states, are we really safe? Are we really connected to our truth and ourselves? And so it's so useful to begin to notice. Just begin to be aware of this. Begin to notice. Start with the coping strategy because it's an amazing entry point into the minds of who we are, into the patterns that we have that we're unhappy with. You know, I was asked a question today around this specifically. If I'm attracting the same type of guy, why is that? And my immediate response is, you're the common denominator. What are you doing and being, or what are you addicted to in your world that is giving you the same experience over and over again, but with a different surface? Speaking with another client today as well, really distressed about where she is in her life and wanting to really feel safe and not feeling safe. Not feeling safe in any capacity. And so the opportunities to go into a coping strategy is to begin to unpack that. To begin, it's an easier entry point because we're not touching the pain or the wounding directly. That is almost touching the wound directly or going straight to the wound or the pain or the fear that we hold within our hearts. It's almost literally putting our finger in an open wound and just moving that finger around. Not pleasant in any capacity at all. It's not comfortable. So the coping strategy is an inlet. It gives us an opportunity to start opening ourselves up, unpacking who we truly are, what we really are in the world. And that's an opportunity for growth and expansion. That's an opportunity for opening our hearts and experiencing and feeling deep love and connection with ourselves first and foremost, and then people of meaning in our lives. Power and blessings to you, beautiful people. I'll see you again soon.